Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Hebrew Woman Show. I'm your host, Renaissance Woman, aka Ren Judah, and today I'm flying solo. Zell is not able to make it, however, the show must go on, right? So we are going to pick back up on our 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership series, and we are on rule number 4, the law of navigation. But of course, as always, before we dive into that, we have to go through our slide, right? Because I always want to make sure that it is understood that this is a channel for women, by women, to help us fellowship and connect with one another. I also like to start off by saying always that the views expressed on this channel are mine and mine alone, and they are not part of that of any entity or organization that I might belong to or am affiliated with. Now, let's get right into it. The purpose of this channel is to explore your biblical principles. And I think that's important to take the time to do the exploration. Why do you believe what you say believe? A lot of times our spiritual foundation comes from family and it's deeply rooted. And just to investigate that, to prod it, to 2 Corinthians 13:5, examine yourself. Excuse me, examine why you believe what you believe. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourselves, whether ye be in the faith. So examine, are you just a follower in lip service, or because this is what my family has always done, this is who they told me we are? But now that you're an adult or a person of age enough to understand what I'm saying on this channel, it's okay to start thinking about these things. Do I believe this, and why? Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves how that Christ is in you, except ye be reprobates. And so I don't want to be a reprobate. I don't want to show up representing something that I do not believe in, okay? And so even if you're a child or a teenager, you can examine yourself and know whether you are in the faith. And it's important that you do that. It's examine that you examine all the things that you believe. How did I get here? Why do I believe this? Has this shown up as true for me? Look at it, study it. You need to study to show yourself approved, okay? And examining yourself doesn't just go into your faith, it goes into everything you do. But for me, the faith is the foundation, it's where it all begins. Here on the Renaissance Woman Show as well. Don't get it wrong. But on the Hebrew channel, when I'm talking to women, hopefully I'm talking to women who are striving to be women of Titus. Titus 2:1 tells us to speak things which are becomes of sound doctrine, that the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith and in charity, in patience. That the aged women likewise meaning you should be all those things that I just talked about, right? So, and also that they be in behavior that becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to too much wine, teachers of good things. And if you have children, if you're running a business, if you're doing mentorship, whatever you're doing, whether you're a teacher in a classroom, you want to be a teacher of good things. And so what does that look like? Okay. Number 4 says that they teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their husbands, that the word of God not be blasphemed. And so the overall point here, a lot of people want to get stuck on issues that do not pertain to them. If you are not a wife, then that still doesn't mean that you are not to be a teacher of good things. You could be a widow. You could just be a single woman coming into womanhood. The whole purpose is that you move so that the word of God may not be blasphemed, okay? And that is why you're going to examine yourself, okay? And these qualities, you take the time to look at Titus 2:1. Look up the words, look up faith, look up charity, look up patience. Understand what it means to be engaged in behavior that becometh holiness. Look up holiness. One day we'll just do that here, okay, guys? We'll just go through these words and what they mean. Chaste, good keepers at home, meaning you're not out here running the streets. That's not to say you can't go anywhere, but when you go somewhere, you're going there with purpose. You're not just out there hanging out. you're out there moving with purpose and reason. Why am I showing up? And we're going to get back into how we show up, okay? We train ourselves to think biblically, not emotionally. That does not mean we don't have emotions, but it means we do our best to try to maintain and control our spirit. Because he who controls the spirit can control the city, right? So you want to be able to control your vessel, and it's easier said than done, right? And I can say that being a person, because those of you who followed me on media, you guys know I will go in and I have a temper. And that's something that I've really been working on. And I was just telling my husband, as I have been listening to for this last week, you know how we go over how did the laws show up. The message about being silent has come up for me repeatedly this week. So that's just something that I'm exploring right now, because I don't believe that you keep running across the same things over, same messages over and over. And I'm just telling you that message is on repeat, and it's on repeat for me because of what I'm going through. And I'm having to learn, because I'm one of those people, I will fight. I believe in fighting. I will fight battles. And there are some hills that I'm planting flags on that I don't need to. And so it's just a matter of learning to pick and choose your battles. And that's such a cliche term, but when you actually start going through something, like, for example, on the Renaissance Woman, we were covering a hostile work environment. When you start going through issues like that, or family turmoil and issues in diversity, adversity, you're going to learn that every battle that you're invited to, you cannot attend, you cannot fight. You'll waste your valuable time and resources trying to engage in that manner. We are here to be women that support women. I think women need to support one another more than ever. And because, especially Black women, because I just noticed, especially in the media space, it just seems like we are under constant attack. I just watched the Megyn Kelly and Jamil Hill debacle, and how Megyn Kelly thought it was perfectly acceptable for her as a professional in journalism, allegedly, to attack another woman and her physical appearance. You know, one of the things women are always talking about is how sexualized and how we're not being respected for our minds. And so in her mind, if Jamil wasn't showing up in full makeup and looking, I guess, the way she looks, powdered up, puffed up, made up, stitched up, then she's not acceptable. It is perfectly okay for you to show up as you are, who you are. And I love that Jamil said, hey, I'm not ashamed of my face. I'm a beautiful woman. I love the way I look. So good for her. And I think a lot of us need to work on that and embrace that. If you are afraid to leave the house without a full face of makeup, and there's nothing wrong with makeup. I love makeup. It's fun. It's art to me. I like to paint. And so painting your face is no different to me. But I do think that sometimes some women just take it too far, to the point where they're afraid, or they don't believe they look attractive without all of that. You're beautiful. Okay. Proverbs 11:14 says, where no counsel is, the people fall, but in a multitude of counselors, there is safety. And this proverb really rings home, because you guys know we use this every stream. And being in the leadership program that I'm in right now, it's for women. And it's just like Proverbs 11:14 fits it so perfectly, because one of the things that we were discussing was who's on your board of directors, right? And everybody on the board, they have their different positions, right? So who has this job? Who has that job? So every woman that you put on your council, they're going to have different jobs. Someone, it may just be there for emotional support, but I'm going to take time out to actually map out my board of directors and what I want it to look like, and the women that I want to show up there. And if you feel like, well, I don't have any friends, you do have friends. You have us here always, and as well as manifest it. That's the whole purpose of writing it down and mapping it out. For right now, your board of directors may end up being women on media, or writers, or whoever it is that you admire and follow and appreciate their content. That may be a woman on your board of directors. And you may even build up the courage one day to reach out to them and let them know, even though I don't know you personally, I have placed you on my board of directors, and I've decided that we are going to be friends, and that I am receiving wise counsel from you, because in a multitude of counselors, there is safety. But I will say for you, when you're choosing people in your life that you can count on, and you guys hear me say this all the time, because I have found that it is true. If you surround yourself with people who are going to just agree with you all the time and tell you what you want to hear, you are going to fail. You need someone around you who is not afraid to tell you no. No, girl, that's not it. And one thing I noticed, and I will say this, I've encountered this quite a bit with dealing with friendships. People today are not used to people telling them no. A lot of us try to align ourselves with people who are people pleasers, and we want them to please us. We want to be the people they please, right? So if you are not, I had a friend, I remember she used to say, it's my way or the highway. And a lot of times, eventually, most people hit the highway, and it's a good way to find yourself alone, right? So I would just say you might want to consider being able to hear, because let's get right into it. Proverbs 19:20 says, hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou may be wise in thy latter end. There ain't no fool like an old fool. You're too old. At certain points, you're just getting too old to where you cannot listen. Even if you don't do, you can at least hear a person out, especially if you have put them on your board of directors. What did you put them there for if you were not going to listen to their counsel? The only people you should be having on your board of counselors and directors are people who you actually trust, believe, and receive sound advice from, okay? So that you can be wise in your latter end. Because there are going to be times when you're going to be hyped up, you're going to be ready to go in, and you need that friend who will tell you, girl, no, you tripping. Okay? Proverbs 28:26, he that trusteth his own heart is a fool, but whoso walketh wisely, he shall be delivered. You can't believe everything that your mind tells you, because your mind is always seeking safety. And sometimes your old childhood programs are running in the background. I remember one of my main go-tos was, I'm the black sheep of the family. No, nobody likes me or whatever. These was one of my programs, and I isolated myself, only to come in and realize that I felt that way as a child because there were things that I didn't understand. But now that I'm an adult, I can go back and I look and I can see however the adults in my life were acting or behaving, they were doing the best they could with what they had. And they may not have realized that they were making that little girl feel not accepted, not welcome. Do I believe it was intentional? Absolutely not, because I can say the majority of the time it wasn't even like that. But I also was the type of kid that liked being by myself, and I loved my TV shows and I wanted to go watch them. But you get my point. My point is, investigate that and make sure that you're not just running off of old childhood programs. And when you can recognize that, a lot of times you'll go back and, like myself, find yourself engaging with your family on a whole nother level. And understanding now that whatever happened then, it may not have even been about you. It was really about them and their behavior. And that's not a reflection of you and what you deserve. Okay. So the whole point too here is about how we show up. We'll talk about Matthew 5:37. Let your communication be yea, nay, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever more than this it cometh evil. And so that's something else that I've had to deal with. You guys know, if you follow me, Clubhouse, this house, social media, period. I love social media and I'm always somewhere. And for me, I was always somewhere giving my opinion. And I'm just in a season now where I've just really realized on a whole scale level that everybody's not entitled to what I think. Some things just aren't people's business. When you're young, especially my generation, I remember when we used to watch Ricky Lake and all those shows, they used to say, let it all hang out. Don't be afraid to be you. Show up and say what you got to say. But guess what? Everybody should not have a seat at a table of what is going on in your mind, okay? So you really need to make sure you gatekeep yourself, protect your mind, protect your thoughts, because everything is not everybody's business. And to that point, let me show you guys something. Let me share this other window. See if I can add this let me take this off the stage real quick and add this. So I had ran across this article that I had wrote some time ago on YouTube. Let's see if I can scroll down to it. Oh, I did a article on September 24th. And if you haven't had a chance to join my YouTube group, in my Facebook group, please do so. Let me actually let me drop the link in this chat here, because I think I try to share quite a bit of what's going on with me there, my writings there. So there's the link to the Renaissance Woman Show on Facebook. But anyway, I ran across an article, and it was funny. It's an older one about not sharing everything you believe with or think with everybody. And I shared it again because it just prompted me to. I just was like, that is a message that like even still rings true for me today. And for some reason, it's just getting shared like crazy. And I'm like, well, sometimes it's funny the things that catch on. Let's see if I can get it to pull up here. Here it is. And it says, not everyone deserves to know the real you. Let them criticize you for who they think you are, because guess what? That's going to be something that people are going to do anyway. And I say here, just because you don't have anything to hide doesn't mean you have to share your business with everyone who asks you. You don't owe transparency and honesty to every random person you come in contact with, whether the person is on or offline. I just added that. But when I was a younger woman, I used to think that because I had nothing to hide, it was perfectly fine for me to be honest about my life. And so that's all I'm going to share there. If you want to read it, just go to the Renaissance Woman page. But the point there was that there was a time where I felt like I needed to, I don't have anything to hide. I can tell the truth about me, because when you're on social media, that I've learned the hard way that is a manipulation tactic of a lot of people on social media. So they can get our information out of you, extract it, use it later on, weaponize it. And in some cases, for some people, I've watched content be created based on their stories to help demonize and drag you. So be selective about who you share yourself with. And those are lessons that I learned the hard way. Don't make the same mistakes I make. You are a gift, and not everybody is entitled to be part of your life, your space, your thoughts. And then let me talk about your social media space and how you show up on social media. You know, you really just have to give it more thought. I think this was all new. So like we've been doing social media for years now. And so I always try to think in hindsight, being 2020, what would I want younger women to know, for those who are willing to accept wise counsel? And it would be just that. Keep yourself to yourself. Protect your image. Protect your brand, because you never know where you're going to end up later. If you would have told me that I was going to end up in where I am now, I would not have believed it, because I thought I was going to retire from a career in law enforcement. So who knows where you're going to end up stopping. So some of these slides we use repeatedly for different things, different topics. And it's funny to me how they just always go together, because our whole purpose here is to remember that we are the salt of the earth. And that's why we do this leadership series, because you need to understand that no matter where you are, whether you're in leadership, have a position as a leader, or if you're just a worker bee, you still are a leader. You're a leader to your family. You're a leader for yourself first and foremost. And everywhere you show up, whether you believe it or not, somebody's watching you. And if you are a person who believes in Torah, the Old and New Testament, how the Bible in its entirety, like we do, you understand that Matthew 5:13 says that ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden under the foot of man. So a lot of people, you tarnished your image. You ruined your relationship so much to the point that nobody takes you seriously. But guess what? That is something that you can build back. It's not the end of the world. I've seen a lot of people destroy themselves and come back and rise like a phoenix from the ashes. So just because you make a mistake or if you made some poor decisions, it doesn't mean it's all over. You know, I love that Dottie Peoples song, You Can Always Begin Again. It's a beautiful song. If you haven't listened to it, check it out, because it's true. You can always start over and begin again. I always tell you, don't just take my word for things that we say here on this channel. 1 John 4:1 says, beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are a God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. So You need to study and show yourself approved. You need to examine what you're being told before you just decide to add it to your repertoire, because it could just be some mess. I will tell you guys, there's a lot of AI content that is running around on media that is completely false. They're just made up stories and sensationalized just to get your clicks and views, because there are a lot of people who do not have integrity and they do not care about making up stories and lying and having you out here looking like a fool, repeating stories that just aren't true. And again, we go back to, so this is about who you surround yourself with, not just in physical company, but in virtual company. You want to be around people who are going to sharpen your countenance. Proverbs 27:17 says, iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Find somebody who's sharper or just as sharp as you, and you all don't agree, so you can sharpen each other. You may need somebody to help you shore up your debate ability if you are a debater. No better place to do that than to find the opposition. And that's not to go in and be contentious, because we want to avoid contention. But if you want to fully get a grasp of an issue, get a full understanding of it so that you can do something like teach. Well, you got to understand the other sides of the argument if you want to teach something. At least that's what I think. Now, some of you guys who follow us on the Renaissance Woman Show, you recognize this because we are doing a leadership series over there as well. And in that leadership series, the title of it is Set Your Intentions and Know Your Status and Geography. Okay. Where are you? Who are you? What are you doing? And more importantly, how do you show up? What drives you? Think about that. Do an honest reflection. It says honest self-reflection is key. Once you've examined your motivations, it's time to ask, how am I showing up? 2 Corinthians 13:5. Examine yourselves. Know ye not your own selves? Examine yourself so you can know how you're showing up. What do you look like? Start taking stock of how people are responding to you. I think a lot of times we really underestimate our own influence. We think, oh, and I would say, even in my case, when I was working my other position, I was like, nobody's paying attention to me. I can get on here and wild out and say crazy stuff and join crazy panels and have ridiculous discussions, because who cares? This is just fun. Now I'm in a season where I understand now more than ever that what you say and do on media can have a major impact on your life, good or bad. And so for me, perhaps my experiences early on are just to come and talk to you, and somebody listening will hear and take heed that you are a brand. You are your own brand. But most importantly, you are a representative of the true and living God. Watch how you're showing up for this company. Watch how you're showing up for your Father, because you represent him. Does that mean you're going to be perfect? No. Does that mean you're not going to make mistakes, that you're not going to say things that you shouldn't? Absolutely not. We are always going to make mistakes because we're here to learn. But we always want to strive to do our best, because watch me back this right back up to Genesis 4:7. When the Most High asked Cain, if thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? But if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. You understand that? Sin will rule over you if you do not do well. So you don't suffer from a moral dilemma. You know the difference between right and wrong. You know what to do and what not to do. Examine yourself and make sure you do well so that you can be accepted. What drives you? Take a moment to delve deeper and examine your true driving force. Again, you see, I quote 2 Corinthians here. And for me, I examine myself. I reflect and realign your intentions and show up as your best self. And for me, I am in a season where it's not always easy to do. And so I have to that's why I'm in this leadership program. And that's why we're doing these leadership series, because while I do want to share my experiences with you all, me going through these shows and doing these topics are also for myself, because I'm growing. So we ask that you check your status in geography. This is something that I do as part of my job when I'm checking the status and geography of a property. What is going on over here in this area? That's something that us as leaders, as women, as representatives of Christ, and that we know where we are. Okay. It doesn't just define where you are, but it charts a trajectory towards where you want to be. It's about focusing a determined path of personal and professional growth. It's not just what the potential of what could be, but intentional steps to get there. So let's talk about that. This is why every week I ask you guys to go back and look over the last couple of laws, because you got to have a vision. And Proverbs 29:18 says, where no vision is, the people perish. But he that keepeth the law, he is happy. And so, let's try to keep the law here. And so here's your reflection questions before we dive into the next law. And that's going to take about 26 minutes. We do about an hour here. So the law just balances out great, doesn't it? Where did these laws show up in your week? Okay. So what happened for you? Because, at first I had this title, What Happened to You? But no, we're going to change that. And we're going to say, what is happening for you? Okay. Let's reflect before we navigate. So you remember the first law is the law of the lid. Leadership ability is the ceiling that determines a person and organization's effectiveness. So where were you effective this week? So if you take the time, and I hope you all got your journals like you were supposed to. And as we go through each of these laws, you're taking the time to journal and reflect back on what happened for you this last week. Where did the law of the lid show up for me? Where did the law of leader? So where did your leadership capacity limit or lift your impact? Have you gained any ground? The law of influence. True leadership is not about influence, not authority or a position. So having a job title does not make you a leader. It just means you have a title and you can maybe tell some people what to do. But are they really following you? Okay. Do they trust you? Leadership is not developed in a day, but through continuous. This is the law of process. Leadership is not developed in a day, but through continuous effort and experience. What small, consistent steps did you take for growth? So if you need these sheets, again, I told you, or just a slide, I will share it with you. All you need to do was throw up the banner and shoot me an email at sister7@gmail.com, and we will provide the worksheets for you so that you can work through the journaling prompts. Also, I'm looking to do a forum on women in media. How do you show up on social media? I had a dynamic class, my last session with my leadership program, and they had a lady come in and she talked to us about our presence on social media. And that is why you see the Renaissance Woman show, there is a sign over there that says under construction, because I realized that I wanted to tweak some things, and we needed to work on that. And we're still working on it. For those of you who are content, I will create a Patreon. I just haven't got around to it. See what I'm talking about? But at least I did get the channels cleaned up to the best of my ability, and we're starting over. So if you're interested in being on this panel of women talking about your experience on social media and how you leverage social media to further your influence, please email me at sister7@gmail.com. We will have a Google Meet and we'll discuss the topic and discuss who's going to be a right fit for what conversation, because this is going to be more than likely a 3-part series. So I would love to have you. And without further ado, we're going to get right on into listening to the 4th law of leadership, guys. So let me always just removing stuff from the stage. Okay. So here we go. Let me move and let me share my screen. And here we go. If you don't have any sound or if there's an issue, just drop a comment in the chat so I'll know, but we should be good to go. So here we go, guys.
Leadership law number 4, the law of navigation. Anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. In 1911, 2 groups of explorers set off on an incredible mission Though they had used different strategies and routes, the leaders of the teams had the very same goal: to be the first in history to reach the South Pole. Their stories are life and death illustrations of the law of navigation. One group was led by a Norwegian explorer, Roald Amundsen. Ironically, Amundsen had not originally intended to go to Antarctica. His desire was to be the first man to reach the North Pole. But when he learned that Robert Peary had beaten him there, Amundsen and headed toward the other end of the earth, north or south. He knew his planning would pay off. Before his team ever set off, Amundsen had assessed the coming challenges and painstakingly planned his trip. He studied the methods of the indigenous Arctic people and other experienced cold weather travelers, and he determined that their best course of action would be to transport all their equipment and supplies by dog sled. When he assembled his team, he chose expert skiers and dog handlers. His strategy was simple. The dogs would do most of the work as the group traveled 15 to 20 miles in a 6-hour period each day. That would afford both the dogs and the men plenty of time for daily rest prior to their following day's travel. Amundsen's forethought and attention to detail was incredible. He located and stocked supply depots all along the intended route. That way, they would not have to carry every bit of their supplies with them on the whole trip. He also equipped his people with the best gear possible. Before he set off, Amundsen had taken the trip in his mind, carefully considering every possible aspect of the journey, thinking it through, and planning accordingly.
I just wanted to stop right there and just point out just how important that is, because you guys know we just listened to the law of process. And one thing, all these laws complement each other and it all goes together and forms one great big package. But that meticulous planning and visualization, and that's something we're going to talk about too, the visualization process. So, in our slide, it talks about where the people where there is no vision, the people perish, right? We want to make sure that we have a vision and that we're thinking it out. Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. That is important. So I just wanted to stop there and just point that out, that is to let that little bell ring, because it goes right back to the law process, thinking it out, planning it out, mapping it out, and visualizing it. We are going to start doing some manifestation groups, okay? Or as some people call them manifestation groups, but you also call them mastermind groups. I would love for us to do that here, okay?
And it paid off. The worst problem they experienced on their trip was an affected tooth one man needed to have extracted. The other team of people was led by Robert Falcon Scott, a British naval officer who had previously done some exploring in the Antarctic area. Scott's expedition was the antithesis of Amundsen's. Instead of using dog sleds, Scott decided to use motorized sledges and ponies. Their problems began when the motors in the sledges stopped working only 5 days into the trip. The ponies didn't fare well either in those frigid temperatures. When they reached the foot of the Transantarctic Mountains, all of the poor animals had to be killed. As a result, the team members themselves ended up hauling the 200-pound sledges. It was arduous work. Scott hadn't given enough attention to the team's other equipment either. Everyone on the team developed frostbite and became snowblind with clothing and goggles. The team was always low on food and water. The depots of supplies were inadequately stocked, too far apart, and poorly marked, making them very difficult to find. Because they were continually low on fuel to melt snow, everyone became dehydrated. Making things even worse was Scott's last-minute decision to take along a fifth man, even though they had prepared enough supplies for only 4. After covering a grueling 10 weeks, Scott's exhausted group finally arrived at the South Pole on January the 17th, 1912. There they found the Norwegian flag flapping in the wind and a letter from Amundsen. The other well-led team had beaten them there by more than a month. Scott's expedition to the South Pole is a classic example of a leader who could not navigate for his people, but their trek back was even worse. Scott insisted that they collect and carry back 30 pounds of geological specimens, more weight to be carried by worn-out men. The group's progress became slower and slower. One member of the party sank into a stupor and died. Another, suffering severe frostbite, purposely walked out into the blizzard to keep from hindering the group. Before he left the tent, he said, "I am just going outside. I may be some time." Scott and his final 2 team members made it only a little farther north before giving up. They died 150 miles from their base camp. We know their story only because they spent their last hours updating their diaries and writing letters. Some of the last words Scott wrote were, "We have been to the pole, and we shall die like gentlemen. I think this will show that the spirit of pluck and power to endure has not passed out of our race. We very nearly came through, and it's a pity to have missed it. But lately I have felt that we have overshot the mark." Scott had great courage, but only at the end did he recognize his shortcomings. Finally, he saw that anyone can steer a ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Because he did not live by the law of navigation, he and his companions died by it. One thing all leaders have in common is the ability to see more and before. They see more than others do because they see the big picture, which not all people grasp. And they see what's coming before others do. This gives them an advantage when it comes to navigating for people that they lead. And today, with the rapid pace of life, that ability to see before others do is especially important so that they don't let their team get blindsided.
That was such a tragic story. I just had to jump in here again, and because I do think one good thing about a good leader is, as well as followership. And I think for those of us who, whether we're leading and at times we are going to follow, sometimes you got to know when to say no and stop following people too, because literally those men followed him to their deaths. I think when the ponies and the equipment failed, I would have quit at that point. I'm just saying I would not have pressed on. But anyway, let's keep going.
The larger the organization someone leads, the more clearly the leader has to be able to see ahead. That's true because sheer size makes mid-course corrections more difficult. And if there are errors in navigation, many more people are affected than when a leader is traveling alone or with only a few people. The disaster of the Titanic was a good example of the problem. The crew could not see far enough ahead to avoid the iceberg altogether. And because of the size of the ship, they could not maneuver enough to change course once the object was in view. The result was that more than 1,000 people lost their lives. First-rate navigators always have in mind that people are depending on them and their ability to chart a good course. I read an observation by James A. Autry in Life and Work, A Manager's Search for Meaning, that illustrates this idea. He wrote that occasionally you hear about the crash of 4 military planes flying together in a formation. The reason for the loss of all 4 is this. When jet fighters fly in groups of 4, one pilot, the leader, designates where the team will fly. The other 3 planes fly on the leader's wing, adjusting to him and following wherever he goes. Whatever moves the leader makes, the rest of the team will make along with him. That's true whether he soars in the cloud or smashes into a mountaintop. Before good leaders take their people on a journey, they take steps to give the trip the best chance for success. Number 1, navigators keep their emotions from clouding their vision. Recently, I came across something that writer Professor C.S. Lewis wrote in 1948 because people were worried about dying as a result of the atomic bomb. It reminded me of the fear people experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Lewis wrote, We think a great deal too much of the atomic bomb. How are we going to live in an atomic age? I am tempted to reply, why, as you would have lived in the 16th century, when the plague visited London almost every year, or as you would have lived in a Viking age when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night, or indeed as you are already living in an age of cancer, an age of syphilis, an age of paralysis, an age of air raids, an age of railway accidents, an age of motor accidents. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all whom you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful and a premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances and in which death itself was not a chance at all.
I just wanted to stop there and say that I believe that wholeheartedly. I think one of the things that happened during COVID, the threat was real. People did die. I know people who died, but I also think that even like now, today, so we've gone to being afraid of COVID to being afraid that Trump is going to start World War III. You cannot walk around paranoid, worried about if you're going to die, because guess what? You are. At some point or another, you're going to die. So at some point, you have to stop making excuses and just live.
Our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all whom you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful and a premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances and in which death itself was not a chance at all, but a certainty. This is the first point to be made, and the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. No matter the conditions we face, leaders must not panic. They can't let the circumstances prevent them from seeing more and before and from navigating people through their difficulties. Tom Morris, in his book Plato's Lemonade Stand, offers a metaphor that can help leaders avoid getting caught up in emotion that might otherwise paralyze them. Imagine life as a large wagon wheel, writes Morris.
Okay, I'm gonna back that up just a little because I did want to interrupt again. I'm gonna let it play through, but I think the interruptions are kind of good too. So hopefully it will avoid a copyright strike as well. But to the point that he just made, I went through something this week at work, and I became so upset about it, and because it's an ongoing issue, that I allowed it to cloud my vision, and I realized, I not so much I panicked, I became angry, and then I became so just driven and obsessed with fighting that I lost sight of the bigger picture, that I have some other responsibilities and obligations to take care of. So the point that he just made, that when you're in leadership, you can't become overly emotional and allow your emotions to cloud your vision. I can tell you that that is true. And to just hear him say that, that's like for me just a second witness of how I allowed myself to let the week get away from me. I was in my photography class and the instructor was giving direction, and I just couldn't receive it because I was so obsessed with fighting and worried about this behavior that I felt was egregious and needed to be addressed. And how dare you? I became too emotionally invested in what somebody else was doing, or in my mind doing to me, that I was letting it affect the business. So I just want to share that. I always want to be transparent with you all, because I don't want you to think that the purpose on here is to get on here and pontificate to you about how to be a good leader. I am learning right now. That's why I'm doing these classes, reading and listening to these books. And I hope that you guys are just as excited and pumped up on this journey as I am to go forward and lead with purpose, because we can do this. So let y'all get back to it.
No matter the conditions we face, leaders must not panic. They can't let the circumstances prevent them from seeing more and before and from navigating people through their difficulties. Tom Morris, in his book Plato's Lemonade Stand, offers a metaphor that can help leaders avoid getting caught up in emotion that might otherwise paralyze them. Imagine life as a large wagon wheel, writes Morris. If we emotionally live on the outer rim, then as the wheel turns, we'll be spun around to extreme highs and lows in rapid and dizzying succession. But if we can learn to move closer toward the midpoint of the hub, we become much more centered. The wheel will still spin, but we won't be so dramatically thrown by its motion. That's a position of power. The best navigators are able to delay their emotions long enough to work through a problem when people are depending on them to lead. How can they do that? First, by knowing and staying true to their definition of success. For example, the definition of success that guides me internally states that success is having those closest to me love and respect me the most. This keeps me grounded and faithful. My external definition of success is knowing my purpose and growing to my potential and sowing seeds that benefit others. These two definitions give me perspective as I face challenges. The second factor that helps good navigators keep their heads in the midst of difficult circumstances is dedication to being bigger on the inside than the outside. This comes from having more faith than fear and from embracing good values. When facing difficult times, values keep us from losing our way or from giving up. Number 2, navigators draw on past experience. Every past success and failure that you've experienced can be a valuable source of information and wisdom if you allow it to be. While successes can teach you what you're capable of doing and give you confidence, failures often teach greater lessons. They reveal wrong assumptions, character flaws, errors in judgment, and poor working methods. Ironically, many people hate their failures so much that they quickly cover them up instead of analyzing them and learning from them. As I explained in my book, Failing Forward, if you fail to learn from your mistakes, you're going to fail again and again. Why do I even mention something that seems so basic? Because most natural leaders are activists. They tend to look forward, not backward, make decisions, and move on. I know this because that is my tendency. But I'm not very good at navigating. It's one of my leadership weaknesses. Good navigators take time to reflect and learn from their experiences. I wrote about this in my book, How Successful People Think. But allow me to recount some advantages of reflective thinking. Reflective thinking gives you true perspective. Reflective thinking gives emotional integrity to your thought life. Reflective thinking increases your confidence in decision-making. It also clarifies the big picture. And finally, reflective thinking takes a good experience and makes it a valuable experience.
I'm going to roll that back. Oops, not too far, but just a little, because reflective thinking is a point that I like to drive home here. It's something that we all need to build up our muscle in, because again, 2 Corinthians 13:5 shows up here again. And this also goes back to the law of process and planning, right? So think on these things that he's saying. And I just wanted to go back and play it again because I think it's just very important. Reflective thinking. Examine yourself. Know ye not your own selves, whether ye be of the faith, except ye be reprobates.
You're going to fail again and again. Teach you what you're capable of doing and give you confidence. Failures often teach greater lessons. They reveal wrong assumptions, character flaws, errors in judgment, and poor working methods. Ironically, many people hate their failures so much that they quickly cover them up instead of analyzing them and learning from them.
Don't they always say the cover up is worse than the crime? Don't try to just hide it under the bed. Don't push that dirty stuff under the bed. Sort through it, clean it up, examine it. Okay? Prove your own selves. Look at what you have produced. Examine it.
As I explain in my book, Failing Forward, if you fail to learn from your mistakes, you're going to fail again and again. Why do I even mention something that seems so basic? Because most natural leaders are activists. They tend to look forward, not backward, make decisions, and move on. I know this because that is my tendency. But I'm not very good at navigating. It's one of my leadership weaknesses. Good navigators take time to reflect and learn from their experiences. I wrote about this in my book, How Successful People Think. But allow me to recount some advantages of reflective thinking. Reflective thinking gives you true perspective. Reflective thinking gives emotional integrity to your thought life. Reflective thinking increases your confidence in decision making. It also clarifies the big picture. And finally, reflective thinking takes a good experience and makes it a valuable experience. Each benefit gives a leader a great advantage when planning next steps for a team and for an organization. Number 3, navigators examine the conditions before committing. Drawing on experience means looking inward. Examining conditions means looking outward. No good leader plans a course of action without paying close attention to current conditions. That would be like setting sail against the tide or plotting a course into a hurricane. Good navigators look at the present and try to anticipate the future so that they can count the cost before making commitments for themselves and for their team. They examine not only measurable factors such as finances, resources, and talent, but also intangibles such as timing, morale, momentum, culture, and so on. I'll discuss this more in the laws of intuition and the laws of timing. Navigators, number 4, listen to others. No matter how much you learn from the past, it will never tell you all that you need to know about the present. No matter how good a leader you are, you will not see everything you need to. That's why top-notch navigators gather information from many sources. For example, before Roald Amundsen's expedition to the South Pole, he learned from a group of Native Americans in Canada about warm clothing and Arctic survival techniques. The skills and practices met the difference between failure and success for his team in Antarctica. Navigating leaders get ideas from many sources. They listen to members of their leadership team. They talk to people in their organization to find out what's happening at the grassroots level. And they spend time with leaders from outside the organization who can mentor them. They always think in terms of relying on a team, not just themselves. Number 5.
I just want to stop right there before he goes any further. And I would just say, just reflecting on what he's saying right now, I had to think about my own management style and realize that I feel like I need to take more time with my team. And I think sometimes when you get placed in a leadership position, sometimes you can get so focused on the rules and the processes and what needs to be done that you don't actually take the time to get to know your team. Like, you know some things about them and you may know them in general, but do you know what makes them tick? Why they produce the way that they produce? What is their overall perspective on the job that they're doing? One of the things that would always make me angry about leadership was I said that they never take the time to talk to the people who actually do the work. And so as I examine myself, I think, when I hold my meetings with my team, I always ask them, okay, what is it that you don't like? What could be improved? What is something that we need to get it to address and get out of here? In my mind, doing opportunity to voice opposition to some of our processes. And while I do think that's important to do, I have to realize that a lot of people, just because I'm comfortable with voicing my dislikes publicly, a lot of times people are silent in meetings because they're not comfortable doing that. They don't want to be put out there. And so I need to start creating more opportunities for them to have that discussion. I feel like even when I do my one-on-ones, just listening to this makes me even reevaluate how I do that. And maybe that my questions can be a bit more strategic. So I hope that these things are things that if you are managing a team or your children, you're thinking of ways to be more creative about how you figure out what makes them tick so you can be more effective at leading them. Because I do think that is the overall goal. If we want maximum productivity, and that may sound crazy when you think about in terms of your children, but you do want your children to be productive. You do want them to be contributing members of society. You want them to be able to take care of themselves when you leave here. You want them to be functioning adults. And there is no greater leadership position than parenthood. You have the responsibility of these little lives in your hands. You are literally shaping the minds of the next generation. So we really need to start taking the time to evaluate and examine how we are leading the next generation or leading and dealing with the people who we are currently in charge of. So we'll just go back a dash and then we'll just get back into it.
Has met the difference between failure and success for his team in Antarctica. Navigating leaders get ideas from many sources. They listen to members of their leadership team. They talk to people in their organization to find out what's happening at the grassroots level. And they spend time with leaders from outside the organization who can mentor them. They always think in terms of relying on a team, not just themselves. Number 5, navigators balance both fact and faith. Being able to navigate for others requires a leader to possess a positive attitude. You've got to have faith that you can take your people all the way. If you can't confidently make the trip in your mind, you're not going to be able to take it in real life. On the other hand, you also have to be able to realistically deal with facts. You can't minimize obstacles or rationalize challenges and still navigate effectively. Pretending obstacles don't exist won't help you to overcome them. If you don't go in with your eyes wide open, you're going to be blindsided. Jim Collins confirmed the balance between faith and fact in his 2001 book, Good to Great. He calls it the Stockdale paradox, after Admiral Jim Stockdale, and he writes, "You must retain faith that you will prevail in the end, and you also must confront the most brutal facts of your current reality. Balancing optimism and realism, intuition and planning, faith and fact can be very difficult, but that's what it takes to be effective as a navigating leader." I remember the first time I really understood the importance of the law of navigation. I was 28 years old. I wanted to lead my organization through a difficult challenge unlike anything I'd ever done before. But I was aware of my shortcomings as a navigator. I took no joy in getting into logistical details, and I was very impatient. So to help me create a way forward in the navigation process, I developed a strategy that I have used repeatedly in my leadership. I wrote it as an acrostic based on plan ahead, so that I would also be able to remember it. The letter P stands for predetermine a course of action. The letter L, lay out your goals. The letter A, adjust your priorities, and then the letter N, notify key personnel. The letter A, allow time for acceptance, and the letter H, head into action. E, expect problems. A, always point to your successes, and then the letter D, daily review your plan. Leaders who are good navigators plan ahead. They see more and before others, and they prepare more and before. This enables them to find a way forward as well as convey confidence and gain trust from the people. Great leaders do all that, plus they make navigational adjustments, changing course when needed as they go along. More than once, Robert Falcon Scott could have made navigational adjustments that might have saved his team. When the motorized sledges failed, he could have turned back. Or when they realized the ponies couldn't make the trip into the mountains, Instead, he valued reaching the pole more than keeping his team alive. He demonstrated an inflexibility that prevented him from making good decisions. And in the end, it's not the size of the project that determines its acceptance, support, or success. It's the size of the leader. That's why I say that anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. For leaders to be at their best, they need to do all 21 laws well, but at the same time, nobody does all 21 well. Of all the laws, I'm probably the worst at the law of navigation. However, I'm fortunate to have someone leading my organization who is better at navigation than I am, Mark Cole. I was reminded of his ability to chart the course as the COVID-19 pandemic struck in the spring of 2020. In February 2020, Mark and I were in Israel leading tour groups of the Holy Land. When we were about a week and a half away from the end of the tour, we began hearing news about a potential pandemic on the horizon. Already in some countries, officials were talking about shutting down travel. We started to have concerns about getting everyone in our Israel and getting home ourselves. But we also had another difficult leadership challenge to navigate. We were then 4 weeks away from holding our twice-annual International Maxwell Certification event, our biggest conference of the year. More than 3,000 people from 64 nations had signed up and were scheduled to attend. We needed to figure out whether to hold the conference or cancel it. But there was a lot on the line. If we canceled the conference, we would lose millions of dollars. We had already given money to the hotel in Orlando where we hold the conference, and we would also be responsible to pay for a huge block of rooms whether or not they were used. Plus, we had a deadline in a few days to pay an additional $1 million for food. We had a decision to make. We could plow ahead and hold the conference. Everything in the United States was still open for business. The airlines were flying, and we could tell everyone who had signed up to come. That would save us financially, but what would it do to the people who had signed up for the conference? Mark took ownership of navigating the company through these decisions. His values were his guiding principles. Our number one value is valuing people, Mark said. We were in Israel experiencing the stress of not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing if we would be able to get on planes to go home. I knew that the people signed up for the IMC were experiencing that same stress and doubt. We waited as long as we could to make the call because we wanted to see what would happen, said Mark. But in the end, we needed to do what was right for the people. We canceled the event in time for people to change their travel early enough to get their money back. The decision was difficult but clear. Mark said simply, sometimes it costs money to put people first. Mark did the right thing, and we were prepared to deal with the negative financial fallout. But then 2 weeks later, something happened. Walt Disney World closed and the hotels in Orlando shut down. Our company wasn't going to be responsible for rooms that could not be occupied. Mark used that opportunity to work with the hotel to renegotiate our deal with them for future IMC events. But we still had thousands of people anxious to be certified as Maxwell leadership coaches. What were we going to do about that? With the help of our staff, Mark navigated that too. They created a virtual event in August 2020, and we ended up training and certifying more than 6,000 coaches virtually. It was the largest training that we had ever held. Since then, Mark has developed a system in which we train as large a group as we can in person, according to the circumstances, while simultaneously providing virtual training to people not traveling to Orlando. It became a huge win for the coaches and for us. That's what good leaders do. They do more than steer the ship, they chart the course. When they practice the law of navigation, they create wins for people on their team, the organization, and everyone they serve. What could be better than that? As I was reading to you the law of navigation and thinking of this as probably the weakest area in my leadership, I began to feel a sense of gratitude for the people I have around me. I often teach that your team, the people that you have around you, they're not there to compete with you. They're really there to complete you, to complement you, to add value to you. And I thought about the people on my team that were good navigators, much, much better than me. And I thought of myself as a quarterback. You see, a quarterback, he really doesn't get paid to run the ball. Quarterback gets paid to get the ball to the person who has the greatest potential of succeeding. So when that quarterback grabs that ball, his first thought is, I'm going to run. His first thought is, how do I get this ball to the person who has the greatest potential to succeed? In the law of navigating, I sit down with my team and I let them know very openly, honestly, that navigating isn't my strength. So who's going to be able to carry the ball? Who's going to be able to take ownership of it? And as a group, what we have discovered with incredible joy is that teamwork really does make the dream work. And what we've discovered is that when you let the team come together and you let them carry the weight, the load, have the vision, the responsibility of implementing their giftedness into the vision and the mission of the organization, then navigation becomes a great reality in your life. So I suggest you do what I do. Very simple. Look at the laws that you're not strong at, bring the group together, discover which ones are good, in this case, at navigating, hand the ball off to them. And by the way, all great leaders I know, they don't always lead. Sometimes I get in line and I follow with the rest. It works really well. So the law of navigating, it's for mature people who realize and are self-aware that they can't do all the laws. And if this is one of them that they don't do well, pass it on to another person. Let them take ownership. And by the way, give them the credit. What I've discovered is when the team compliments me and completes me, and I point to them and thank them, especially publicly, they can hardly wait to pick up another load for me on another day.
That's real talk. I think one of the hardest things to do is to learn how to delegate and allow your team to support you. And I think a lot of times it has to do with trust. We don't trust people. We think, well, nobody can do this great, but you really have to get out of that thinking. And the best way to do that is to make sure that you vet. At the beginning of the show, we always talk about making sure that you surround yourself with wise counsel. And so I'm just going to share with you again what we talked about in the leadership class that I was in this week. Actually the first week of that class, your board of directors. So I hope you guys, when you focus on how the laws show up in your life this week, you also start working on your board of directors. I'm going to work on mine as well, and I'll probably share it with you guys. So let's everybody, if you can, take the time to do that. Write it out so you can see what it looks like, even if you have to put people who have been here and gone on your board of directors. I don't know if Maya Angelou or Toni Morrison, whoever you put on your board of directors, but these have to be people you tap into, the reading their books and listening to the content that they have, old interviews where you can get that knowledge and that base of information. And then, but also make sure you put some people who you are around on your panel. And if you don't have anyone, I think it's a great time to now actively start reaching out and look for a mentor. So that being said, we're at our hour. As always, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Shabbat Shalom, and we will see you next week as we dive into the fifth law of leadership. Shalom, everybody.